meeting who is a commissioner, just speak up. Commissioners, has anyone read the minutes for 8:24 and 10:26? And if so, do you have a motion?
I move that we approve the August 24th, 2020, October 26th, 2020 minute reservation board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. These will be the minutes. Commissioners, looking at today's agenda, does anybody need to recuse themselves for any reason? Okay, I hear no reasons. I'm informed by the director that there is no director's report today. So we have one agenda item, which I now call.
All right, well, can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm Dan Krasnoff. I'm the Cultural Resources Director for the City of St. Louis. And I'm excited today to present the agenda item for the nomination of the Central Baptist Church to be a city landmark. We currently have 30 city landmarks, and this would be the latest addition to that list. Bethany, if we could move up to the first slide. Or do I do that? Let's move past that. There we go. All right. So as I said, this is a nomination as a city landmark for 2842 Washington Boulevard, Central Baptist Church. You see a picture of the church here that was kind of done sort of artistically to be our first slide. Let's move on to the next one. So Central Baptist Church was constructed in 1975. It is the corner of T.E. Huntley Avenue and Washington Boulevard in the Midtown neighborhood. This is a picture of the church, which is a mid-century modern building. It addresses the corner of the street. It is located at the southeast corner of those two streets. It is defined by a rubble semicircular or crescent-shaped facade that faces the corner. And then it sort of has two more primary facades. The facade flanking it to the left and to the right. The right facade is the west facade of the building. The left facade is the north facade of the building. And it features a series of brick facades that kind of fan out and are connected to one another by stained glass windows that are vertical in nature. And then it has a bell tower out in front that is sort of a contemporary twist on a traditional church bell tower. The congregation's previous sanctuary or church building was destroyed in a fire in 1971, and this is the building that replaced it. I guess I should say I'm going to talk today in my presentation almost exclusively about the architecture and the sort of physical evolution of the congregation. Gail Brown is here from the congregation. I believe the Reverend from the congregation is also going to be here to speak, as is Alderwoman Marlene Davis. And I think they can speak more effectively than I will be able to about the social history of the church. It's sort of two reasons. One is the striking mid-century modern design of the building, and then the church's contribution to the civic life of the city of St. Louis and the way it has assisted folks in the Midtown area improve their quality of life through social services and civil rights activities through the years. So Bethany, if we could go to the next slide. So the next slide is just to orient folks a little bit. The picture on the left shows the city of St. Louis. I think folks probably recognize this in general. On the right-hand side is the Mississippi River. On the left-hand side, that rectangle that we see a little bit of is Forest Park. And then the circle in the middle identifies the location of the church itself, which is located a little bit east of Grand. I don't know if folks can see my cursor. They may not be able to, I guess. But this is sort of just east of Grand and just west of Jefferson Avenue in the Midtown neighborhood, north of the old Mill Creek area. Additionally, the picture on the right is an image, a map showing an A and a B. A is the church building that's being proposed for nomination as a city landmark today. At the bottom of the screen, at the top of the screen, across Washington Avenue, the B building is the education center for the church that is not part of the nomination today. Next slide, please, as I hit the button and it did nothing. So next I'm going to show some pictures of the building. This is actually a picture of the education center across the street that I just mentioned. This is not part of the nomination, but it is part of the extensive construction the church has done to provide the services to their congregation and the community that they support. Next slide, please. Okay, here's another image of the front of the building with sort of an emphasis on the facade flanking to the left or the north facade of the building. There we see the sections of brick facade that are then punctuated by those those tall vertical elements that are stained glass windows and the impressive bell tower out in front. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of the western facade of the building. The west facade runs very close to, or extends very close to T.E. Huntley Avenue, whereas there's more of a green buffer on Washington Boulevard side. Here you can see, I hope folks can pick up on the fact that those brick facade sections have an undulation to them. They have a really elegant curve structure and shape that I think is really interesting and really emblematic of the sort of use of form in mid-century modern design to express design elements on a building as opposed to earlier architecture in St. Louis, which tends to be a little more Rococo and uses elements such as terracotta to express ornamentation. Here, the form is the ornamentation in essence. And you see on the left-hand side is that semicircular rubble stone wall that is such an important element of the building facing the corner. Next slide, please. So the next two facades I'm going to go by very quickly. These are not facades that are integral to the expression of the building. They are more utilitarian at the back of the building. So this is the south facade along what is the alley, or used to be the alley. The church has a parking lot to the right that is not pictured here. And the next slide, please. This slide is the eastern facade of the building. Again, it is a utilitarian facade. It is not part of the sort of design elements of the building, and it is there to enclose it on four sides. Next slide, please. So this picture is being put here, these two pictures, to shine a little more emphasis on the ornamental aspects of the church building. The picture on the left, I think you can again see those kind of curved brick facades that are so elegantly designed, which I'll say for the fifth time, but I love them so much. I think they're a wonderful design element, along with the stained glass, which is another important design element. You see the stained glass, obviously a very old element in ecclesiastical architecture, but here it's a very linear form. It's very geometric. It's very mid-century modern, and in its geometry. The image on the right are doors that lead into the church. It's a little hard to tell on this, but the doors have these kind of wonderful stained glass designs as well that are very colorful, which you really can't see here, but really add a lot of visual impact and visual interest to the design of the building. Next slide, please. And finally, the campanile or bell tower that's out in front. You know, bell towers obviously are an important part of church design historically. Here we have a very kind of geometrical and streamlined design for a bell tower with a large crucifix coming up the center of it and really sort of holding the corner of the building. This is an integral part to the design of the church, and it is part of the landmark designation. Next slide, please. So just some context pictures. This is the church on the right and then looking east towards downtown on Washington Boulevard. Next slide, please. This is looking west on Washington Boulevard towards the Grand Center District. On the left there is a new building, or a relatively new building, for the Salvation Army, who has a complex of buildings in this part of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Here we see an image looking north. So the building on the right is the Education Center I mentioned earlier. So this is T.E. Huntley heading up north towards Del Mar and towards the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood. Next slide, please. Here looking south on T.E. Huntley towards Olive Street and the former Mill Creek Valley area, now home to Harris Stowe State University and the Wells Fargo Advisors campus. On the right there is that Salvation Army building, and on the left is the church building being nominated today. Next slide, please. I'd like to speak to just a minute or two about the physical evolution of the congregation over the years. They are celebrating their 175th anniversary in 2021, which is really just remarkable when we think the city of St. Louis hasn't been around that much longer than that. This first image you see is 3rd and Cherry Street. This is from the Compton and Dry Pictorial Atlas of St. Louis. The Pictorial Atlas is actually from 1875. So by this time, the church was no longer at this location. If you look at the very lower left-hand corner of the illustration here, you can see a little piece of Eads Bridge. So you can see this would have been just a little bit north and west of the current day Laclede's Landing. Next slide, please. So this next picture is the next location of the church, of the church's congregation and building. This would have been at 8th and Green Street, which is no longer Green Street, but just a street, I guess this is Cole Street now, 1 block north of Washington Avenue. You can see in the black circle there was the location of the congregation between 1851 and 1885. So that would correspond with the period of the Compton and Dry. There is a church building there that I'm not sure is Central Baptist or not, but this is the general location of it. And you can see at the far left-hand corner, sort of in the lower middle of the screen, is the northern edge of the old post office building. So this would have been about 3 blocks north of the old post office, just past Washington Avenue. Next slide, please. Okay, so the congregation at that point moved from sort of the core of downtown to where today to heading out towards the Midtown area. This is a location at 23rd Street and Morgan at the time. Now it's Del Mar. You can see on the picture on the left is a black circle. That black circle corresponds to the dash circle in the picture on the right, which is from the Whipple Fire Insurance Atlas from 1902. And that is a little hard to read on the small screen. I wish we were on a big screen because that footprint does say Central Baptist Church. The church was there from 1885 until 1913 when it moved to its current location. And next slide, please. So as I said, the church is being nominated on a couple bases. One is the basis of the architecture, which I think is quite striking, and the other is the basis of the social service and civil rights work that the church is well known for and was documented in the petition that you all received. I would like to take a minute or two before I wrap up just to talk about a couple of aspects of this beyond just the design of the building and the history of the congregation. First is the sort of centerpiece of the petition application is landmark standards. I'm not going to go through all of those, but just hit some of the highlights of what they're designed to do. The landmark standards are for the church building only, not for the education building, as I mentioned. They are based on the Secretary of Interior standards for building rehabilitation. They apply only to exterior aspects of the church building. will apply to all exterior alterations of the church moving forward, and that will require permits through our office. And the purpose is to maintain the character defining features of the building. So aspects like the semicircular rubble stone facade, those undulating curved brick facades, the stained glass windows, the stained glass doors, the bell tower. Those are elements that will be maintained in the future in their current appearance to respect the design of the building. Next slide, please. And I'll just wrap up by talking for a minute or two about process, if I can. As I've said, a petition has been submitted. It has been referred to the Planning Commission and the Board of Public Service. Both of those entities have voted to support this application. The Planning Commission has said this is in accordance with the city's comprehensive plan and will promote the general proper planning and development of the city. Tonight, the Preservation Board is considering that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you all are planning on supporting this nomination tonight once you hear all this testimony. Assuming the board does support this application tonight, it will then be, we'll take the petition and we will turn that into a board bill, and that will be submitted at the Board of Aldermen. There will be a hearing probably sometime in early to mid-January at the HUD's Committee of the Board of Aldermen. And I anticipate final passage by the time the board goes down around the first week in February. The mayor would then sign the ordinance creating the landmark, and at that point, Central Baptist will become the 132nd city landmark in the city of St. Louis. And that concludes my testimony. At this point, I'll take any questions you all may have.
Commissioners, are there any questions? Okay, let's let the congregation present in the order that it wants to. Who's first?
Okay, I can go first. Thank you very much.
Great, Ms. Brown, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. Good afternoon, commissioners and staff. Really appreciate this opportunity to present before you this afternoon. I come to you this afternoon on behalf of our pastor, Anthony L. Riley, as well as the members of Central Baptist Church. I am a lifelong member of Central. I won't tell you how many years, but all of my life. I presently serve as the chair of the trustee ministry. We are indeed excited, proud, and honored to share with you why we are pursuing this prestigious designation as a historic landmark in the city of St. Louis. In April, as Dan mentioned, first of all, Dan, thank you so much for your presentation. As Dan mentioned, in April of 2021, we'll celebrate 175 years. Since Central's inception in 1846, we have been engaged in activities of significance with a focus on education, outreach, and social justice. Our history also demonstrates determination and resilience. We feel that this designation will give honor and recognition for the efforts of all those who have made such a significant impact on our church and the St. Louis region. We believe that the awareness of our history will serve to inspire generations to come. To quote Theodore Roosevelt, the more you know about the past, the better prepared you are for the future. In my brief remarks, I would just like to highlight just a few of the actions and items that demonstrate Central's history of promoting education, outreach, and social justice. In education, in 1863, our pastor, Jesse Bolden, organized the Northwestern and Southwestern Convention, which fostered evangelism and planted schools and churches in the Mississippi Valley. In the 1900s, early 1900s, our eighth pastor, George Stevens, became the first African-American member of the Board of Education. He was also instrumental in organizing Vashon and Sumner High School for people of color. a very prominent member of our church, Julia Davis. She was a historian and educator, and she was instrumental in raising funds to purchase books and materials for people of color. There is now a library on Natural Bridge named in her honor. Regarding outreach, when we're looking at outreach, our seventh pastor, John Lewis Coren, helped the founding of Orphans and the Old Folks Home Association among Negroes, the Pine Street YMCA, and the very well-known Phyllis Wheatley branch of the YWCA. Our pastor during the golden years, as we call them, Reverend T.E. Huntley, from whom the street was named, Ewing Street was renamed T.E. Huntley Avenue. He served as our 11th pastor. He was instrumental in instituting our Church on Wheels ministry. This was a ministry that went out into the community. We had a church bus that would go to the VA hospital, would visit inmate housing, and would go to various neighborhoods to take church to the community. Pastor Huntley was also instrumental in organizing our food and clothing ministry, where we served the homeless, the hungry on a daily basis. We now continue that ministry, and we call it the crisis ministry, where we serve many individuals and families on Tuesday. And then just recently in 2020, under the leadership of our now pastor, Riley, we have the Central Garden Ministry was formed, and it is a garden that serves to provide fresh fruits and vegetables to the community. In the area of social justice, very proud of this. Our second leader, John Richard Anderson, was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and in 1851, was the builder of our first house of worship at 8th and Green. It's now Lucas Avenue. In the mid 1800s, prominent members of our church were the Harriet Scott and her husband, Dred Scott. During the tenure of 1903 to 1937, Pastor Stevens became the first member of the Board of Education. He also was a spokesperson against segregation and Jim Crowism, and helped to elect Walthall Moore as the first African-American Missouri State Representative. In the 50s and 60s, we were very active in the fight for civil rights. A friend, an associate of our pastor T. Huntley, Dr. King, visited our church and also preached there as well. Presently, our pastor, Anthony L. Riley, has quickly become engaged in the injustices facing our community and has formed the Central Baptist Church Social Justice Ministry. This ministry has led and participated in activities to advance equity for all. So in addition to all of the advances in education, outreach, and social justice, Central has been resilient. You've heard in 1971, our edifice was destroyed by fire. Immediately after our church was destroyed, an effort was organized by our church to raise funds to build a new church. This effort was led by the trustees, along with a member who was the lead architect on the design that's being presented today that you saw in the pictures that Dan presented. His name is William E. Lee, and he was a member of our church and had his own architectural firm in Richmond Heights. The design that's being presented was known at the time as being ultra modern design, and it was built to recognize the past with this beautiful stained glass windows and doors, stone front facade, and bell tower. In 2007, as you heard, we faced a lot of damage to the sanctuary as a tornado damaged the roof, and the sanctuary was badly damaged. Again, Central had to rebuild. The then Pastor Scott organized and launched a campaign called That's Crazy. And through that campaign, funds were raised so that the sanctuary could be renovated with the ideal of serving the congregation during present times and well into the future. In April of 2019, we were blessed with a dynamic, visionary leader, Anthony L. Riley, who has a big, bold vision for the future that builds upon the foundation of education, outreach, and social justice and resilience. His vision employs new strategies that will continue to allow Central to touch the lives of people in a way that has a positive impact on its members and the St. Louis region. As we move forward in the preparation of our 195th anniversary, we believe this designation will serve to remind us of our history and continue to inspire us into the future. Martin Luther King said that we are not makers of history, we are made by history. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present, and we appreciate this consideration and your time. And I would like to ask if Pastor Riley would like to make any additional remarks. Pastor Riley? Are you there? Okay. Does anyone see Pastor Riley if he's on?
It does not look like he's on the list.
Okay. He may not have been able to get on the call, but I welcome the opportunity to answer and address any questions that you may have for me on behalf of the church.
So are there any questions for Gail regarding the church itself and their presentation? Let's see if there's anything in the chat. Okay, I don't see that. I know Alderwoman Marlene Davis, you are with us. Would you like to address the board?
Thank you, Dan. Just very briefly, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew I am in full support of this petition, and I do know and understand the history of this church and other churches in the immediate area of Midtown, because as they were removed from that near downtown area, once we passed Tucker and started growing our city, they did maintain their worship space, although the locations that were chosen were very nice. But when we think about it, everything around them, they were not allowed to participate or enter. When we think about the fact that even the simple things like Woolworth store, they were not allowed to come in and be served. So we have a lot of history here in Midtown. Most of the African-American churches from the city of St. Louis of any long heritage are right here in Midtown. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that Central Baptist chose to stay in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Davis. I would like to mention, I didn't mention this in my presentation, that we have ongoing discussion with Washington Zion Church as a potential additional city landmark in this part of the neighborhood, and additional church as well. So there may be more Midtown church nominations coming before the board in the next year or so. Bethany, is there anyone else signed up to speak?
No.
Okay. With that being said, does the board has the agenda and the staff recommended resolution in front of you, and would anyone like to make a motion or that motion or a different motion?
Is the chairman, Dan, this is Barbara Burkett. Is the chairman gone from the meeting?
Yeah, he had to go, and I only learned that he was going to, I don't mean to throw him under the bus, but I only learned about this very recently. So if we were having a much longer agenda, I would dish it to one of the board members to chair at this point. But I think since we're not all in the same room, it's just hard to coordinate.
Perhaps you might do that anyway so that one acting chairman could call the roll.
Of course. Does anyone on the board, David, you've been on the board a while. Would you serve that function?
Sure, I'll fill in for Rich Callow. Do we have a motion that the petition as submitted by the property owners, we approve that and direct that a landmark designation bill with a landmark preservation plan be prepared?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All right, we have a first and a second. I'll do a roll call here. Melanie Fathom,
Yes.
Anthony Robinson,
Yes.
Randy Vines,
Yes.
Mike Colleen,
Yes.
Beck Coder,
Aye.
and David Richardson. Aye. It passed.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, commissioners.
Do we have any other business, Dan?
Nope.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you all very much.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.